Okay, so sanita- in chapter 5, sanitation and sewerage, will is actually break down into just a few subtopics. So first off, we'll learn a bit about what is a terminology, meaning what is a different name given inside this chapter, and then a bit of the fundamental, and then we will find out what is a system, what type of different system that we can install inside our house, the sanitary system. And then after that, we go further away. We learn a bit about how the sewage can be processed. Okay, so all these lecture notes, as I've mentioned again before, is all from this two book. So these two books provide you the most information for your lecture notes, but I think for some chapter it might not be enough. I will have to add as we go on. Okay, so just a bit of a short video before we start. So let's have a look at it.
Producing Speech-Alone, the most natural sounding text-to-speech software on the market. Hey.
On sunny days, the Roman citizens of Ostia could be found on a long stone bench near the Forum. Friends and neighbors exchanged news and gossip while simultaneously attending to more urgent business. These public latrines could seat up to 20 Romans at a time, draining waste in water conduits below. Today, most cultures consider trips to the restroom to be a more private occasion, but even when going alone, our shared sewage infrastructure is one of the most pivotal inventions in the history of humanity. While many ancient religious texts contain instructions for keeping waste away from drinking water and campsites, waste management took a more familiar shape as early as 3000 BCE. Ancient Mesopotamian settlements often had clay structures made for squatting or sitting in the most private room of the house. These were connected to pipes which used running water to move waste into street canals and cesspits. Water infrastructure like this flourished in the Bronze Age, and in some parts of the Indus Valley, nearly every house had a toilet connected to a city-wide sewage system. Ancient Cretan palaces even offered a manual flushing option. Researchers can't say for certain what inspired these early sewage systems, but we do know that waste management is essential for public health. Untreated sewage is a breeding ground for dangerous microorganisms, including those that cause cholera, dysentery, and typhoid. It would be several millennia before scientists fully understood the relationship between sewage and sickness, but the noxious odors of sewage have recorded associations with disease as early as 100 BCE. And by 100 AD, more complex sanitation solutions were emerging. The Roman Empire had continuously flowing aqueducts dedicated to carrying waste outside city walls. Chinese dynasties of the same period also had private and public toilets, except their waste was immediately recycled. Most household toilets fed into pigsties, and specialized excrement collectors gathered waste from public latrines to sell as fertilizer. In China, this tradition of waste management continued for centuries, but in Europe, the fall of the Roman Empire brought public sanitation into the Dark Ages. Pit latrines, called gongs, became commonplace, and chamber pots were frequently dumped into the street. Castles ejected waste from tall windows into communal cesspits. At night, so-called gong farmers would load up the waste before traveling beyond city limits to dump their cargo. Europe's unsanitary approach persisted for centuries, but toilets themselves underwent some major changes. By the late Middle Ages, most wealthy families had commode stools, wooden boxes with seats and lids. And in the royal court of England, the commodes were controlled by the groom of the stool. In addition to monitoring the king's intestinal health, the groom's intimate relationship with the monarch made him a surprisingly influential figure. The next major leap in toilet technology came in 1596, when Sir John Harrington designed the first modern flush toilet for Queen Elizabeth. Its use of levers to release water and a valve to drain the bowl still inform modern designs, but Harrington's invention stank of sewage. Thankfully, in 1775, Scottish inventor Alexander Cumming added a bend in the drain pipe to retain water and limit odours. This so-called S-trap was later improved into the modern U-bend by Thomas Crapper, though the term crap predates the inventor by several centuries. By the turn of the 19th century, many cities had developed modern sewage infrastructure and wastewater treatment plants, and today toilets have a wide range of features, from the luxurious to the sustainable. But roughly 2 billion people still don't have their own toilets at home, and another 2.2 billion don't have facilities that properly manage their waste, putting these communities at risk of numerous diseases. To solve this problem, we'll need to invent new sanitation technologies and address the behavioral, financial, and political issues that produce inequity throughout the sanitation pipeline. So,
Okay, so this video is just a brief history lah on how toilet comes about. So actually, besides that, you also have a short comic strip. Don't know, maybe you guys notice it. Let's see. Is it this? Yeah. So here, this is a quick short. Yeah, this is a comic strip lah regarding sanitation and sewerage. So if you go back to the olden age, we just leave it lah as like normal animal. So it's not very this one is going back to the very olden age lah. So it's very harsh life. Then we don't really care much about it. But then as we grow bigger, meaning as we start to settle down and we grow from, let's say, having a few houses for a few hundred people, we have a village, and then we start to go to becoming a city where we have millions of people. So we call that a city. Then we have to start worry about this sort of services. But before that, we aren't really very, very smart. So we just leave it all behind lah. So we don't have the knowledge that we have now. So because we know that now, sewerage is very dirty, that contain a lot of bacteria and they make us sick. So now we know, we have the knowledge, we are armed with it, and we make sure we do not have in contact with sewerage. But during that time, we have no idea. So we just ask questions meaning what should we do? So where we want to do it. And then another street. So this one is like, first maybe we want to separate out to male and female. So this is for public lah. So last time, during when we first introduced this sort of services, not everyone have the luxury to have this sort of services installed in their own personal houses. So as like the video, there will be a public usage toilet lah. So maybe they separate it, maybe they have it together. And then not sure what this really means. Maybe if you guys can find it out. Not sure if it is in Spanish or German. Okay, so when people start staying together, when population grew, then it becomes a problem that we need to consider. Because if there's no services in place, so people, when there's a lot of people, then we start to have our own methods of disposal. So uh, like the video that is shown just now, is talking about Roman time, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so it's talking about the Roman time. So they're actually quite advanced, or they actually are very good. They are actually a very very good thinker, and they build their city according to a certain planning. So that's why they implement all these sort of services into their city. But then when it goes back to Europe, so you medieval Europe. So medieval Europe is something like it's ruled by kings, and then we have people, normal people that works as a peasant and aren't very very educated. So it's some sort of like dark age in the Europe. So when people are not so educated, then they want to have their own convenience, and if this is the standard that time, so they can just pour the sewage out into the street because they have no idea of the danger towards this sort of practices. So they just pour it into the street lah. So this is actually what really happens during the medieval Europe, and it's very disgusting lah. So it becomes so disgusting that nobles, meaning rich people, they use sweet selling herbs or sticks. So as they pass through this sort of poor area, which do not have a very good sanitation, they will use it to sniff it to cover themselves, to pass through the area lah, so that they do not smell the bad smell. And because of that, because we don't really understand, so the problem associated with this sort of sewerage, a lot of people died due to plague and cholera. So then people start thinking, what is there any correlation? Meaning, what is the connection between disease and sewerage? So because once we connect the dots, and we found out that having sewerage very very close to us, contaminates or affect our health, then we start to pass new law. So this is where people are forbidden to use streets as sewerage, meaning you cannot throw it there. You cannot have like the one they have in a castle, maybe just go down into the street. So it becomes a law. Then the normal resident will have a question because this is their practice and we do not have any sewage line. So a new invention are made. So we have a flush toilet So we have a flush toilet, a new appliances to use to install in everyone's house if they can afford it, and then sewage line starts to be laid all around the city. So because we have a flush toilet and then we start to lay sewage line, so we have a connection. In each house we can have a toilet, and then we have a line going out. But then it becomes a question, where does this line go? So we solve it step by step. Human history is like that. So you have a problem, we solve the first step, we construct a toilet, and we construct a pipeline which transport the sewage out of the city. But because we have no idea what to do with it, we just flush it down into the river. So as of now, this solves the immediate problem, which is getting the sewage out of the city and away from human. But because it's going into the river and sea, so it actually contaminated lakes and sea. So it makes the environment very dirty and smelly. And then this result in many complaints. So some people who have their livelihood at the river or maybe at the sea or the lake, they will start to complain because you're polluting the environment. So once complaints starts to come in, then some wise people who think about it, think of another solution to this problem. They build a sewage farm. So this is basically just a big pit. You have a big pit and you dig a very, very big hole, and you just have a pipeline and you just dump it all into this to slowly fill it up. So it's just a big hole. But because we have so much people, this sort of system, by digging a hole and filling it up with sewage, is not really smart. So if you have a very, very big volume, it will be a lot of work to dig this hole, and then it will be filled up very, very fast. So it will not be able to cope, or it's not a very good solution. Then more complaints because it doesn't solve the new solution doesn't solve the problem. So we have sewage treatment plant where we actually treat the sewage into clean water to be disposed back into the environment. So in Malaysia, you will just go that to the river So for places that is not so packed, or for places or settlement that's not too packed, I mean it's alright to go back to the river because the amount is so little. But if you have a very, very huge amount, then we need a sewage system in place. So I mean in the beach, dig a hole. Okay, so in away from the city, in small town or villages, sewage pipe actually do not exist. So they have to be removed manually. So this is some sort of like what China is doing. But when it comes to a more... Okay, so next off, then usually this will be sold to vegetable farmer. So because raw and untreated sewage is very nutritious for the plant, they will want it. So we can use it as fertilizer. So this is last time. So nowadays, we don't really use it on fertilizers because if you don't clean the vegetable properly, although they will grow very magnificently due to the sewage, but it will be a hazard to our life. So human sewage contains a lot of disease, and sometimes it might be absorbed into the plant, and then once it consumed back by human, it will make us fall sick, which is not good. Okay, so we have flush toilet introduced, and then during the 90s, 50s, typically this is all towards the city. So during the 90s, 50s, and 60s, in Malaysia, we start to have flush toilet, but this one is more towards cities. But if it goes towards small town or villages, then we don't really have a centralized treatment plant. So if we do not have it, then we have a cesspit or we have a septic tank, which which we'll see later in the lecture slides. Yeah, as mentioned here. So you have a septic tank. Okay, so during the 90s and 60s, so not every place have proper sewerage system. So most of it, I mean, if there's no regulation, it will just go straight into the river or sea. If there's regulation, and by right, we should have a septic tank. So once we have a septic tank, let's say this is our house. So we have a pipe which leads to a septic tank, which leads to nowhere. So it's just a underground tank, pipe leading to the underground tank. So once this is full, they actually have a opening here lah. Then a truck will come over, put the pipe in, and it will suck up all the sewage inside this tank. Underground lah, so it will be underground, and then there will be a opening here. So pipe can go down to suck up all the sewage. Okay, so we do not want it to go into our river and sea, so we actually have to clean it all up or treat it lah, in essence. So we want to treat it so that it actually do not pollute our environment and also do not affect our health. So how does it work is that from the village or from the town, we have our sanitary appliances which we use to catch all this dirty water, and then it goes through a pipeline, either a simple pipeline, and then finally it will end up at our sewage treatment plant. So before that, same as like our water supply, we want to have three primary processes. So the first processes will be a filter. So this is to first filter out big or physical object lah that might be inside the sewage. So like the water supply, sometimes a lot of stuff can get mixed into the sewage. So because this sort of stuff cannot be decomposed, meaning they might be organic, they might be inorganic, they can be wood, they can be our household appliances, or they can be even our clothes. So sometimes, unless you work that, unless you have a job, yeah, you can have a look at the STP. So you actually see that a lot of rubbish can be thrown inside here lah, meaning people flush out a lot of stuff into the toilet. So a lot of them will end up at the sewage treatment plant. And first off, before we allow the water to go for treatment, we want to filter all this rubbish out first. So we will only be left with the real sewage. So this is important lah. And then next, we want to allow any big object to sink to the bottom of the channel. So it's like a flow lah. So they'll have sand and grit where any suspended inorganic matter can slowly settle down into the bottom of this channel. And then they will go into a tank. So this tank is to allow it for more settlement. So as it settle, once it passed through the first stage, which is here, once the sand and grit is removed, so what is remaining when it goes to the second tank should be sludge, meaning it will allow the organic matter lah, for it to slowly settle down. So a sludge is something like a mud like that lah, but it's like a fertilizer mud lah from our sewage. Okay, so more filtration steps through stones. And then after that, finally, we go through the third, which is using microorganism, either bacteria or algae or worm. So usually you allow the bacteria lah to eat up all the organic material inside this sewage. So there's actually two methods. So the first one is you pump in water or we disturb the surface. So by disturbing the surface, we are actually promoting more exchange of oxygen into the sewage. So it can be in a round shape or it can be in a square shape, as these arms move for this square back and forth, or this round tank around, they're actually just disturbing the surface of the sewerage. So once they disturb the surface of this sewerage, it's just promoting, it's just having disturbance towards the surface, and this will actually allows for more physical contact lah, or movement lah, which will allow more oxygen to be absorbed into this sewage water. So as more oxygen is absorbed into this sewage water, it provides the necessary oxygen towards the bacteria. So more bacteria and a lot of food, then they will grow very happily lah in their eating and replicating. Okay, so to sometimes they are mixed back together, bacteria and sewage, to have this process where all the good stuff in the sewage is used up by the bacteria. Okay, so another method, instead of having a mechanical device disturbing the surface, front and back, or maybe in around, so we can actually install a blower. So this is a small device at the bottom of the tank, which is connected to pipes, and then we have a pump at another location that connects all these pipes together. So this pump, when they run, they are actually blowing in air to the tank. So this air is essentially trying to disturb and move the whole sewage to give more oxygen into here. So more oxygen, like the mechanical movement on the surface of the sewage, meaning more oxygen, more growth of the bacteria lah, because there's a lot of oxygen and there's a lot of food inside. Oops. Okay, so besides that, we also can have a stirrer lah. So actually, we have a lot of different method in trying to promote the growth of bacteria, because bacteria can break down the sewage into cleaner water, because they are eating up all the suspended particles inside this sewage water. Okay. So finally, when we go to the final step, then we can discharge it back into the river or the lake lah. So this one is let's see. So this one is, I think, is some sort of like in-house tank lah. But this is just an example lah of how sewage treatment can look like a very simplified version. So we can have our sewage in here, where it overflows and come up here. So when the water level the sewage level reach a certain level, then it will overflow and come out as a clean water. Effluent means water lah, discharge lah. Okay, so here at the bottom, it will be the settlement lah of any sludge or any suspended particles, and then it can be discharged, and this one can actually be used as a fertilizer. So this sludge, we want to maybe dry it, and then we can use it as a biofuel. So burning, we can use it as a biofuel, or we can press it, dry it, and then this can be later transported to use for this, or maybe as a fertilizer. Yeah, as a fertilizer. So a short comic strip regarding that. Okay. Okay, so a bit of terminology. So we have here sewage. So liquid discharge from us, maybe it's a fecal matter or urine. We call that as sewage. So don't confuse sewage and sewerage. So sewerage is pipes and pipe works, and then from our house towards the treatment plant. And then we have another. So this one is number one, which is important. So this one is number two. We have sludge. So this one is any liquid from our bath, shower. So the important thing is this is excluding fecal matter and urine. And then next one, number three, we have trade water. So any industrialized waste or liquid for manufacturing and chemical processes, they will need a separate treatment because, as we know, water, like the previous chapter, water is a very good universal solvent, meaning a lot of stuff can be dissolved into water. So dissolving our animal or vegetable matter inside water, we will call it as sewage. But when it contains chemical, then this is a trade waste. So chemical in the water is very damaging to the environment because this is non-natural. So this it requires a separate process to treat it. So it cannot actually go into our sewage system. Then you'll notice that we have our laundry. So our laundry is usually made up of a more similar to our environment product. So it's actually okay to go through our sewage treatment plant. Okay, then finally we have this is another portion It's more towards here. Will be more towards of other terms of the plant. So we can have our sewerage, which is a pipe works, and then we have our manhole, sludge, and final effluent. So effluence meaning is discharge, our final discharge from sewage treatment work. So besides that, we actually also call our sewage as let's see. So this is also actually called water. So any water contaminated with this, we can call this as black water. And then if it's just for your info if you have water that's contaminated with fecal matter or any urine, then we actually call it as a black water. So here, I just skip it through. Basically, when we're talking about wastewater, most of wastewater is 99% water and 1% of the contamination, which is maybe sewage or other component But this 1% or 0.1% is actually very damaging to our environment. If it's at a very, very huge quantity, then it will damage our environment like say in a very, very big city. So we can produce a lot of waste and it will damage our environment, which is very bad But if you are in a village, then this one it will not impact so significantly onto our environment because the amount is very little. So we can get away with that. So basically, sanitary works is actually divided into three processes. You can have our collection, treatment, and then finally disposal. But then in terms of perspective, how this process can be flown through is like we have our sanitary appliances, and then it will go through our pipe, meaning our waste or soil pipe, and then we have our main sewer pipe. Then this will go to our sewage, and once it's treated, you will discharge it into the river. Okay, so a few of the authorities in Malaysia. So in Malaysia, we have IWK, which is the Indah Water Consortium, which controls most of the water treatment plant in Malaysia. So buildings have to follow UBBL and then any local municipal council regulation. But when it comes to construction or sewage treatment plant, in Malaysia, we are governed by IWK lah. Okay, next one we have sanitary system. So here we actually in sanitary system in a few slides later we have different appliances lah. But first off we have pipes here. So pipes typically, I mean, because you will not be able to see all these pipe, soil pipe, waste or vent or anti-siphon. So actually, if you look around your houses, you actually cannot see the pipe. So because all these pipes are actually, I mean, aesthetically, meaning visually, it's actually a bit ugly lah to see all this if they are exposed. So that's why you will not be able to see them because they are already embedded inside your building or behind your wall lah. So know that this is there. So this sort of pipes are all there because if not, how does your water or your wastewater flows out from your building? So they are there lah. Okay, so here we actually have 4 types of pipes. We want to separate it out. So first off, we have our soil pipe. So this is from our WC or urinal. And then after that, we have our waste pipe, which is from our sink, bath, room, shower, or any bidet. And then after that, we also have a ventilation pipe. So this is additional pipe above waste or soil pipe that allows gas to escape from the system. So why we need to have this pipe? Later I will explain in the picture. And then we have another anti-siphon pipe. So this one is to not allow the fluid to backflow out from your end. And then also to prevent loss of the trap seal. So hopefully along the way, I will cover all the reasoning on why and how does it work. Okay, so inside a building, depending on how big it is, we will have different type of system. So it can be a single stack, it can be a one pipe, or it can be a 2-pipe system. So for a single stack system, it's usually applicable to a small occupant, meaning for a landed small house lah. And then as we go up the scale, 1-pipe system and 2-pipe system, then it will be this sort of system will be able to accommodate for a bigger crowd. And there's advantages to disadvantage to this system. So this is how a single stack system will look like. You have your appliances, and then in a single stack system, you only have one single line across your house. So you'll notice that because of how this is configured, let's say this is just a single story landed house lah. So this is your ground floor, and then this is your first floor. You only have 2 floors. So because of how we want to ensure that we do not install too many pipes here and there, and then we need to have one pipe all the way across. So you'll notice that your ground floor and your first floor, typically the layout of your floor, your toilet will be in the same location so that they can share the same pipe. So this is where the layout of your building can be restricted due to due to where you install your pipe. So you can always have toilet at other location, but then you have to waste money to install a pipe from bottom to top all the way across to your building. So a single site system is just a single pipe from bottom to the top where you have a copper wire cage here to cap it off your pipe to allow for ventilation. So why we need this cap or this opening is so that our wastewater can flow down here. So if we stop at here, let's say we just cut it off here, then you have to imagine this will be difficult. So think of the everyday example like when you're drinking a drink outside. So you might be given a drink and then you might be given a straw. So same concept. If you were to press one end of this straw and you were to take it out, so there's water here and you were to take it out, so the water will actually be contained here, and there's actually gas or air in the air here. So same concept If you do not have an opening or additional length that allows for gas to escape from here, then you have this sort of concept or this sort of situation here where you can move the water out you can move the water in a straw out from this drink and the water will stay here. So atmospheric pressure will force this water to stay in this straw. This will be the same concept here. So we do not want that because if we try to flush and our pipe just end it like this, then this one will come out it will shoot out So because of that sort of reasoning, we want to have additional pipe all the way up to allow gas to escape and to allow the sewage to flow down this pipe. So this is the reasoning we need a ventilation pipe. So it's just an additional extension of this. Either that or if at the bottom here, we can install additional pipe out But this is in a situation where there's no other appliances that can go into here and flow out. Okay, it doesn't have to be all the way to the top. As long as you are above a certain level of your appliances, then it will be good enough for this vent. But you also want it to be out of your building so that the smell can be diluted into the environment. Okay, so for one pipe system, so all of them is still in the same, but then you want to have separation between your WC and your basin. So this is called a one pipe system. There will be a separation So the WC will go into here, one of the pipe, and then the basin will go to the other pipe. So this is called a one pipe system. And then we go to two pipe system. Then we have separation. So the difference between all these systems is that for the first one is the most economical because we only have one pipe, but then it also has the least capability, meaning it's able to allow the least amount of water to flow through the quantities, meaning how much volume. And then as we go up the scale to here, the two pipe system, this has the advantages of being separated, meaning in a layout, if you see from a plan, you can have it at a very, very big, you can have a very, very big layout because these pipe are not, can be separated. So we can have a pipe here, and then we can have a pipe here from a plan view lah. So let's say this is all our WC. This is the room for our WC. So our one of the pipe can be here. And then for the basin, the pipe also can be here. And then they can be connected down below and away. So this is the advantage of two pipe or dual pipe system. Okay, so for this one pipe, because there's the separation is just between this and this. So this is just purely, this pipe is just purely ventilation. So if you look at it from a plan perspective, you cannot separate, you cannot have a separate pipe where this is your vent and this is your soil pipe, because it doesn't make sense to put them away from each other, because they are there to vent. So the further you place it away from this soil pipe, the less efficient it is to allow for gas to escape. And it'll be a waste of money for this bottom length to install this additional. So one pipe system, these two pipe will be together if you look at it from plan view. And then for a single stack, then you have one, and then usually you have one very, very big pipe So advantages of this is you have two. You can separate these two pipes away from each other. So you can have one here, another one here. Okay, so I mean, because we have two pipe instead of one. So the advantages is that we have two pipes instead of, okay, this is not a very good example. So for this one pipe system, because we have two pipes instead of one, so with that in mind, we can actually fill up, or this pipe can go, this soil pipe can work at full capacity. This is one of the advantages of one pipe system. This one of the soil pipe can work at full capacity, and because this ventilation pipe will always be empty, then they can serve and allow for this soil pipe to work the max. But whereas in the single stack system, if you were to work this to the max, meaning you flush, all of them flush, and then you open the tap, or the tap you open it up, all of them flowing into this pipe. So if you were to clog up this pipe, then due to gas pressure, everything will shoot out from your appliances back. So that's why single stack system is more for residential. So for a small building But when we go towards a bigger building, let's say a condo or maybe a office building, where we have a lot of people and a lot of people might be using the toilet or the appliances at one time, then consideration will have to be taken to install additional pipe, and we call this as a one pipe system. Or if there's a need to have a very, very big toilet, let's say we need to accommodate for OKU, so, and then maybe we have additional normal toilet for male and female. So all these additional appliances, they will give a loading towards this pipeline. So that's why we want to separate them all up So instead of putting a lot of pipe at each room, we can have a pipe here just for this sort of just for these sanitary appliances. Okay, so it's 9 now. Let's have a